Most people go to the cinema to escape reality, but there is a specific darker corner of filmmaking designed to make you regret ever walking through the door. We have been conditioned to expect a certain safety net in our entertainment, a guarantee that no matter how bad things get, the credits will eventually offer some form of catharsis. That is a total lie. There are films that exist solely to dismantle your psychological defenses and force you to look at things that cannot be unseen. This is not about mindless gore or cheap jump scares. It is about the stories that are so conceptually transgressive they can leave a permanent mark on your psyche. If you think you have a high threshold for intensity, these 10 films are going to prove you wrong. They represent the absolute limit of what the human mind can endure. Join our community by hitting that subscribe button if you are looking for the true edge of cinema. Starting us off at number 10 is a masterclass in tension that turns a mundane, tacky piece of furniture into a 90-minute panic attack. The coffee table arrived in 2022 and immediately became a word-of-mouth nightmare, centered on a couple who buys a table against the wife's better judgment. A freak accident occurs within the first 10 minutes that is so horrific and so permanent that the rest of the film becomes an unbearable exercise in anticipation. There is almost no gore, but the husband's desperate attempts to hide the reality of the situation while hosting a dinner party will make your skin crawl. It is the ultimate test of a viewer's nerves, stripping away the comfort of horror tropes to deliver a grounded, agonizing look at a life being destroyed in real time. This is a film that refuses to let you breathe, forcing you to sit in the silence of a mistake that can never be fixed. Do not watch this if you value your peace of mind. It is the most stressful experience put to film in years. Landing at number 9 is a visually gorgeous but emotionally punishing study of grief and the perceived misogyny of nature. Directed by Lars von Trier, Antichrist follows a couple, played with terrifying intensity by Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg, who retreat to a cabin in the woods to heal after the death of their child. What follows is not a healing process, but a descent into graphic self-mutilation and madness as the world around them begins to reflect their own internal rot. It is famous for the chaos reigns fox and some of the most difficult-to-watch imagery in the history of the medium, but it is also a deeply layered work of high art. It explores the psychological collapse of a relationship through the lens of a dark, primeval fairy tale where nature itself is the antagonist. This is a strictly 18-plus journey that is designed to disturb you on a primal level, offering zero comfort and even less explanation. If you think you've seen dark cinema, this film exists to redefine the term. For our 8th selection, we have a romantic drama that hides a razor-sharp, agonizing secret. Takashi Miike's audition begins as a slow-burn story about a widower who holds fake film auditions to find a new wife. But the movie slowly, painfully shifts its tone until it erupts into one of the most infamous torture sequences in cinema history. It is a brilliant bait and switch that uses the first hour to build a sense of traditional romance, making the final act feel like a personal betrayal of the audience. The sound of Kiri 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 has become legendary among genre fans for the sheer dread it inspires. This is a masterclass in building a sense of wrongness, showing us that the most terrifying monsters are often the ones who wait patiently for us to let them in. It is a cold, clinical look at obsession and the consequences of deception, leaving the viewer stunned and physically uncomfortable. Revisit this only if you have the stomach for a finale that refuses to blink. Taking the number 7 spot is the most realistic and devastating depiction of nuclear war ever produced. Originally made by the BBC as a what-if documentary, Threads follows the lives of 2 families in Sheffield before, during, and years after a nuclear strike. It doesn't look like a Hollywood blockbuster. It looks like a news broadcast from the end of the world, stripping away every heroic trope to show the slow scientific decay of human society. There are no survivors here, only victims who are forced to witness the total collapse of medicine, agriculture, and language itself. It is so effective and so traumatic that it reportedly influenced the nuclear policies of global leaders during the Cold War. It is a film that offers no hope and no escape, serving as a cold, hard look at the reality of our own fragility. This is essential viewing that you will likely never want to see a second time. It is a sensory nightmare that stays with you forever. Coming in at number 6 is a micro-budget masterpiece that weaponizes social awkwardness into pure, unadulterated terror. Creep uses the found footage format to follow a videographer who answers a Craigslist ad to film a dying man's final messages. But the man, Joseph, is just a little too nice and a little too weird. The true horror of the film comes from the protagonist's refusal to be rude to his host, a hesitation that slowly turns into a survival situation as Joseph's behavior becomes increasingly unpredictable. Mark Duplass gives a performance that is genuinely unsettling because it feels so close to a real-world encounter with a predator. There are no special effects or jump scares here, just the nightmare of an overstayed welcome and the terrifying realization that you are trapped with a person who has no boundaries. It is a brilliant study of human behavior and the social contracts that we use to keep ourselves safe, until they fail. Watch this to understand why nice is sometimes the scariest thing a person can be. Landing at number 5 is a film that begins as a grueling divorce drama and rapidly descends into a literal fever dream of body horror and madness. Set against the bleak, concrete backdrop of Cold War Berlin, Possession is an unhinged exploration of the psychological death of a relationship. Isabelle Adjani delivers what is arguably the most intense acting performance ever captured on a lens, specifically during the legendary subway station sequence where her character undergoes a total physical and spiritual collapse. It uses surrealism and disturbing creature effects designed by the same mind behind E.T. to manifest the internal monsters we become when love turns into resentment. This is a story that captures the raw, biological fallout of a breakup, showing how the fragmentation of a home can lead to the literal manifestation of trauma. It is a suffocating, hyperkinetic experience that refuses to play by the rules of traditional narrative, instead opting to drag the viewer through the wreckage of a human psyche. It stands as a haunting work of art that proves the most terrifying things in existence aren't ghosts. They are the people we share our lives with. Taking the number 4 spot is a film that functions as a direct, aggressive attack on the audience's own sense of morality. Michael Haneke's Funny Games, whether you watch the original 1997 version or the 2007 remake, is a home invasion thriller that refuses to follow the rules of the genre. Two polite young men take a family hostage in their holiday home and force them to play a series of sadistic, meaningless games. But the true horror is Haneke's refusal to give the viewer any sense of catharsis. He purposefully breaks the fourth wall to remind us that we are complicit in the violence we are consuming, literally winking at the camera as if to ask why we haven't turned the movie off yet. It refuses to provide the satisfaction of a heroic escape, turning the act of watching into a survival situation for the viewer. This is a punishing critique of how we consume media and why we find entertainment in the suffering of others, leaving you feeling hollow and complicit by the time the final game is played. Securing the number 3 position is a Shakespearean tragedy with a hammer, and one of the most celebrated achievements in South Korean cinema history. Oldboy follows a man who is kidnapped and imprisoned in a single room for 15 years for no apparent reason, only to be suddenly released with 5 days to find his captor. What follows is a gut punch of extreme style and operatic impact, highlighted by the legendary hallway fight sequence which was shot in a single, grueling take. While the choreography is a masterclass in physical storytelling, the true power of the film lies in its twisted psychological core and the final revelation that completely recontextualizes every moment of the journey. It is a raw, high-stakes experience that explores the corrosive nature of vengeance and the realization that the truth is often far more painful than the mystery itself. This is a perfect example of revenge cinema that pushes the concept to its absolute, agonizing limit, leaving you physically stunned by the time the screen turns black and the credits roll. Our runner-up at number 2 is a philosophical inquiry into the nature of pain that represents the absolute peak of the new French extremity movement. The 2008 original version of Martyrs starts as a standard home invasion revenge story, but it takes a sharp, terrifying turn into a high-concept exploration of the afterlife and human endurance. It is famously, almost legendarily brutal, but unlike generic gore films, the violence here feels strictly necessary to the spiritual and tragic point the movie is trying to make. It asks what lies on the other side of total suffering, and whether or not the human soul can be forced to see something transcendent through the act of systematic brokenness. This is a strictly 18-plus journey that is deeply spiritual in its own dark way, leaving the viewer with haunting questions about the limits of the human spirit that cannot be easily answered. It is an exhausting, transformative masterpiece that stays with you like a physical scar, proving that true horror can be found in the quest for enlightenment through agony. Finally, taking the crown at number 1 is a film that many consider to be the most terrifying war movie ever made. The 1985 Soviet achievement Come and See avoids the heroic tropes of the genre to show the raw, surreal horror of the Nazi occupation of Belarus through the eyes of a young boy. This isn't just a movie about combat, it is a sensory nightmare that uses extreme realism and haunting sound design to make you feel the total psychological collapse of its protagonist. The production famously used real live ammunition on set to capture a sense of genuine, paralyzing dread, and the result is a film that feels less like a drama and more like a historical record of a descent into hell. By the time the boy's face has aged decades in the span of a few days, the audience is left completely hollowed out by the experience. It stands as the greatest achievement in cinema history because it refuses to sanitize the past. It forces us to look into the abyss and acknowledge exactly what humanity is capable of when the moral compass is destroyed. These 10 films define the absolute limit of the medium, the ones that refuse to play by the rules of comfort or entertainment. I chose these specific movies because they don't just stay on the screen. They follow you home and force you to reckon with parts of the human experience that most people would rather ignore. I want to know which one of these left the biggest mark on your psyche, or if there is a film so intense yet brilliant that you think I am a coward for leaving it off the list. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want more lists that dig into the grit and the soul of filmmaking, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now.